There's a lot of debate out there whether it's safe or not to pressure wash a dirt bike. The areas people are concerned about are the intake and exhaust, bearings and seals, chain, and the radiators as well. So what I'm going to do is pressure wash my bike like normal and then tear into some of those components afterwards, see if there's any damage or any signs of water in there. So the pressure washer I'll be using is just a cheap Ryobi electric one. Definitely not very high powered, but it's got plenty of power to wash a dirt bike. I would try to keep it under 2500 PSI for your pressure washer. By the way, I'll have this pressure washer linked down in the description to where you can buy it. To protect the intake and exhaust from water damage, I'll always be pulling off the seat and air filter and installing a wash cap. Pretty hard to get water behind that. And then for the exhaust, just a simpler muffler plug will do. And the areas you want to be careful around when you're pressure washing are the radiators, any type of bearing such as the swingarm pivot bearings, linkage bearings, wheel bearings, and of course the steering head bearings as well. And by being careful, I mean not getting too close to those bearings or seals. A good distance to stay away is about 12 to 16 inches, depending on your pressure washer. So believe it or not, it is safe to pressure wash a chain. That's the only method I've ever used for cleaning a chain, and I haven't had one single issue with it. For this particular chain, it is a DID X ring, and I've had it on this bike and my previous bike as well. Probably well over 100 hours on it, and it's been holding up incredible. And all I've ever done for cleaning is spray it down with the Maxima cleanup and pressure wash it. So I'd recommend staying about 10 to 12 inches away from the chain just to be careful. And then immediately after pressure washing, I'll spray down the inside of the chain with Maxima MPPL. This will prevent the chain from rusting. All right, I've got the bike all washed up. Now let's dig into it and see if there's any water in those components I spoke about earlier. The first thing I'm gonna tear into is the intake. Just gonna pull off the wash cap and take a look into the airbox boot and see if there's any water in there. Here's the moment of truth. Just gonna shine a flashlight down into the airbox boot. I do not see any signs of moisture so far. That's good. You can see there's still some water inside the airbox, but nothing in the air boot that's actually gonna lead to the engine. So that's a really good sign. Really handy to have those wash caps. I'll put the link to where I bought mine down in the description. Now for the exhaust, not a whole lot to check out. Just gonna pull out the plug. And I really didn't do a whole lot of pressure washing around the muffler here. so it's pretty unlikely that water got inside, but it looks pretty dry. One thing I didn't talk about earlier is the electronics. On this bike, there's not a whole lot to worry about. Basically, just have a wiring harness, CDI box underneath the front number plate, and a ignition coil up inside of here. On a 4-stroke, especially a fuel-injected bike, there's a lot more going on. So that's usually a bigger issue with water getting in the electronics. However, on this bike, I'm just going to pull off the front number plate, disconnect the wiring harness from the CDI box, and take a look inside, see if there's any water in there. Alright, these are the two connectors for the CDI box. When I pulled them off, there was a little bit of moisture here at the base of the connector. Let me zoom in on it so you can see what I'm talking about here. See, there's just a little bit of moisture build up there, but nothing down inside the connector itself or in the CDI box. As you can see on the connector, there's a seal, and that seals off any moisture pretty good. Let's take a look down inside the CDI box. Thankfully, it looks like there was some dielectric grease down inside of there, and that always helps combat any moisture buildup. So while I have it apart, perfect time to apply some more dielectric grease to it. So this is the grease I'll be using. Really helps prevent any issues with water buildup inside of a connection. So far everything is checked out fine, nothing inside of the intake or exhaust, and the electronics seem to be sealing up pretty good too. So before I tear into it anymore, I figured I'd give you guys a little backstory on this bike so you have an idea on the maintenance history and how often I've been washing it. So I bought this bike about 2 years ago. It was sitting in this guy's shed. Some stuff was torn off of it, like the carburetor, some plastics and whatnot, and the aluminum was super corroded. So I had to go through and clean all that up, but that's besides the point. I ended up pulling the bike all the way down to the frame. The motor came all the way apart too. And surprisingly, the bike was actually pretty much original. It had original tires, original grips, so really hadn't been ridden a lot. Anyways, I went through the whole bike, cleaned it all up, re-greased everything, replaced some parts, and I've been riding it ever since. So it's had about 2 seasons of riding. I would say about 3 times a month during the riding season. And after every ride, it's been thoroughly pressure washed. So it's definitely got a lot of pressure washing in those 2 years. So this should be a really good indicator of how well the bearings and seals hold up to pressure washing. I'm actually really curious to see this as well. I'm gonna start at the front end. So the front wheel is gonna come off. I'm gonna check out those bearings and seals and then inspect the steering stem set as well. I know a ton of you guys would love to have a scissor lift like this. So check the links down in the description to pick one up. I love this one, it helps out so much. And I think they're only about 150 bucks or so. Alright, let's pull out these spacers and check things out inside. I just see a bunch of grease in there. I do not see a speck of water. Down inside of there, it does kind of look like water. So I'm gonna run a screwdriver in there and see if it's water or grease. Definitely looks like grease to me. Yeah, it's gotta be grease. If there was water in there, usually it'd be beating up on top of the grease, and I don't see any of that. Let's check out the other side now. Yeah, this side looks pretty clean as well. It's crazy how you can pull just a couple bolts and the front end is completely off the bike. So let's check out these upper steering stem bearings. Oh, they look pretty good. Plenty of grease still left on them. Looks like there's still a good amount of grease in between the two cages, but no signs of water, which is awesome. And up here on the race, I don't see any water in there as well. Now onto the lower steering stem bearing. Looks like there's a little less grease on this one, and definitely some sand in there as well, but no signs of moisture. Keep in mind, this is 2 years of riding and washing the bike several times a month. It is definitely going to need to be cleaned up and re-greased, which is the biggest reason why I wanted to pull this bike apart to check things out. Since you guys have just been eating up the last couple videos, I've been getting a ton of engagement on them. I'm going to do a little giveaway. So I've got a few stickers over on my website, primemx.com. And so I'm going to give away a sticker pack. All you have to do is comment down below, "Too stoked." And I'm going to pick one of your comments, and this sticker pack right here will be yours. One more thing before I check out the rest of the bike. I figured I'd give you guys a little heads up. I will be in Denver, Colorado, Saturday, June 2nd for the Thunder Valley Pro National. If any of you guys are going to that race, I would love to see you there. So if you see me out there, come say what's up. Next up, I'm going to check out the shock linkage bearings and the swing arm pivot bearings too. And I need to re-grease them anyways. Let's pull apart the linkage and see what we got inside of it. If there's any part that's going to have water inside of it, it's this part right here. It's on the bottom side of the bike and it's always super dirty, so there's a ton of pressure washing involved with the linkage. The linkage actually looks really good. There's no signs of any water in these bearings or even on the pins at all. So of course it's going to need a cleanup and re-greasing. And if you guys remember right, a few videos back I was showing that there's some play in this lower shock bearing. So while I have the linkage off the bike, I'm going to go ahead and replace that. I'm going to do the same thing with the swing arm here. Just pull apart the pivot bearings, check them out, clean them up, and re-grease them. Another thing I'm going to do while I'm at it is pull out the chain adjuster bolts. These commonly seize, so I'm going to clean them up and apply anti-seize to the threads. Alright, everything checked out fine with the linkage and swingarm. No signs of any water in those bearings. So I've got them all greased up and the bike is ready to go back together. But make sure you stick around towards the end of the video. There's still a few more things. Got the bike all back together, and another area of concern when pressure washing a dirt bike is the radiators. So a pressure washer can bend over the fins if you get too close. These ones actually look pretty good after 2 years of pressure washing. Let's check out the front side. Front looks pretty good too. So like I mentioned earlier, you want to stay about 12 inches away. If you're careful around the radiators, you should have no problem pressure washing them. There's also a lot of debate whether it's safe to pressure wash a chain. So I'm going to split apart a link and check it out. I've got a link split apart on the chain, still got the plates over on the chain, and then the inner part, the pins and O-rings over here. So what we're looking for is rust or corrosion here on the pins and the inner part. So the pins look pretty good, no rust on those. The inner part of the chain looks pretty solid as well. Starting to show some wear, but still plenty functional. The rollers on the center part of the chain are starting to show some movement. So the chain is going to need to be replaced fairly soon. But as far as water damage and signs of water in there, I don't see much at all. So as long as you stay about 12 inches away from the chain when you're pressure washing, and then immediately thereafter spray like a WD-40 or Maxima MPPL in there and you'll be good. And then follow that up with a chain lube, of course. Another thing people might be worried about is pushing water past the gaskets on the engine. The flywheel cover would be the most likely gasket to let water through, since it's so exposed during pressure washing, and there's a rubber grommet on the front side of it here. So if there's no water behind the flywheel cover, I would venture to say the rest of the gaskets are fine. So if there was water behind the flywheel cover, the flywheel would definitely be rusted since it is bare steel, and the clutch arm and clutch cable would have some corrosion. But no signs of any water in here, and I even had a torn gasket on the cover. Since the outer clutch cover has an O-ring instead of a gasket, I'm going to pull that off and check behind it too. Once again, if there was water behind the cover, it would be beating up on top of the oil, and there is absolutely no signs of that whatsoever. Now I can say with 100% conviction that pressure washing a dirt bike is absolutely safe. There were no signs of any rust, corrosion, or water damage in all those areas I checked over. So now you guys need a good, affordable pressure washer. Click the link down in the description to buy the exact pressure washer that I use on a weekly basis. Trust me, it's going to make your life a lot easier when it comes to washing your bike. If you guys enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up and share it with all your riding buddies. This is some good info to have. Alright everyone, thanks for watching and I'll see you later.